Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning out there, Blog Talk Radio land and Rainbow Soul. I always have to shout out Rainbow Soul because that's where I got started when I actually was trying to get an interview for my book Portia when it came out. We're going back over 10 years, you guys. And the owner of Rainbow Soul said, why don't you start your own show? And that's how Off the Shelf got started. As I was telling our guests, who I'm excited to introduce to you guys in just a minute, we're going into 13 years now. If somebody had told me that, I would have said, oh, no way. No way. And I've loved it. We've had listeners from around the world. We've had New York Times best-selling authors, Essence best-selling authors. We've had business owners. We've had doctors on here who've written books, psychologists, and some of our guests have actually gone on to international, national, and regional television, and I mean leaders on TV shows that you guys probably see every day, and they've been here on Off the Shelf. So we have another guest who is going to join that long list of honorable guest here at Off the Shelf, and I'm delighted to introduce her to you. But before I do, I want to leave you with this word to put it in your spirit to kick off our Off the Shelf February the 18th show with. Love will find and heal the most brokenhearted, disappointed, abused, and ashamed. Love has come. There's no turning back. And that is from my new book, Love Pour Over Me, which I hope you will go out and get a copy of. You can get it in ebook format and in print format. Now, I'm going to tell you something about a good book, just as we're going to discuss some good books today with our guest has written and been so to share your art. Some people do art and they hide it from the world. To share your art so others benefit from it is truly, I think, an act of love and a blessing. But one thing about a book, you're not going to know how good it is. You're not going to reap the benefits of it if you don't read the book. I was just in Barnes & Noble earlier today, and I picked up a book by Malcolm Gladwell, and I'm trying to finish another book. So I read, too. I read a lot of books. But if you don't read the book, the benefits that are in it, you don't get them. You don't get them. So gift yourself with a copy of Love Pour Over Me. Again, you can get a copy in ebook or in print format for less than $4. And you'll get a whole lot more than $4 out of it, trust me. So I want to welcome everybody to our Saturday, February 18th show. It's cloudy here in Georgia, and I normally go out for a walk after the show, and I hope that it does not rain, but we'll see. But now I want to welcome you all. I'm excited about our guests, and I count this as a blessing that we've had such wonderful people on Off the Shelf. And joining our legacy, our long legacy of amazing guests today, this morning, is Patricia Bridewell. Patricia, she's an award-winning Christian author, and her stories, they have a real-life feel to them. And more Christian novels, I find, are taking that on. I can't remember the author I used to read when I was a little girl who wrote Christian novels. I loved her works. But a lot of Christian novels until recently, they were so cleansed, almost like they weren't writing about things happening in this world, and a lot of people turned away from them and were bored with them. They were just a little too cleansed. Well, Patricia, her stories have a real life feel to them, so you can relate to them. And novels that Patricia Bridewell has written include Two Steps Past the Altar, Keeping Faith, Reflections of a Quiet Storm, isn't that a nice title? A Generation of Curses, makes you wonder what that's about, and Single Mama Dating Drama, which a lot of people deal with. Patricia is also a nurse educator. We want to ask her about that. She's a public speaker, a mother, and a grandmother, and she makes her church home West Angeles Church of God in Christ. You can find Patricia Bridewell, and it's Bridewell, spelled just as it sounds. But you can find Patricia Bridewell online at www.patriciabridewell.com. Again, her name is spelled exactly the way it sounds, Patricia Bridewell, PatriciaBridewell.com. Welcome to Off the Shelf, Patricia.
Yes, thank you so much, Denise. I just want to first say I am just honored to be on this show, and I thank you for this privilege, and I want to congratulate you also on your book, and I plan to purchase that book today. So I'm just glad to be here.
I appreciate that, Patricia, and it's a pleasure to have you on Off the Shelf. As I was saying at the start, I didn't even think I would ever have a radio show, and then some of the guests we've had on, I see them on TV like every day. They've gone on to do that well. So I hope that in the future I look up and I say, oh, my gosh, there's Patricia. look what she's doing. I hope you join that long list. So before we launch into absolutely, before we launch into today's show's questions, these first two questions I ask all of our guests, because I want our listeners to get a little backstory on our guests rather than just diving right in to the questions about the book. So just to give us a little background on you, can you tell our off-the-shelf listeners, Patricia, where you grew up and what life was like for you growing up?
Okay. Well, I grew up in Los Angeles, California, which is where I currently reside. I've been here for most of my life. Back in the 80s, I moved to the Midwest, and my husband and I at that time moved there, and we were there for 5 years. But I've been back home ever since 1992. I grew up in South Central Los Angeles. My mother and father were divorced at an early age, but I lived in a home that was full of love. I lived in a home with my mother at one point and my brother. And then we had the grandmother and my aunt and 2 kids. She had 2 kids. So it was really a home where, we were really inspired by, the Christianity that our grandmother brought to the table and by, the hardworking women who were just really sincere about keeping their family together and raising us positively. We didn't have a lot, but, we got everything we need through love, and we lived in a community where, we had friends and we went to school, and it was just really a very nourishing atmosphere. And I think that's the reason that I'm the way I am now, because I saw my grandmother, my mother, and my aunt give so much. If your neighbor didn't have something, and they needed it, then they were willing to help, and vice versa. So that's what I actually did. I'm a nurse. I have 2 kids. I have 2 adult kids, and I have a grandson. And I also am, as you mentioned, a nurse educator, and my background is in mental health and the emergency room. So I've been a nurse since my 20th year, and I'm also a family nurse practitioner. So this is my 20th year in nursing, and I write. I write books, and I love, and I'm thankful to God. Mm-hmm.
So many of our guests have their childhood was really amazing, and that's a good thing. That is a very good thing to hear. Then we've also had one guest who he and his mom had to flee their country due to some uprisings that were going on. So it's really good to hear so many people say they had a very nurturing childhood. So when you were a child, you work as a nurse educator. You've been in that field for 20 years. You had caring, strong women where you grew up in Los Angeles, where you still live. What did you dream of when you were a young girl? What did you dream of becoming, Patricia? Did you dream of becoming a nurse? Maybe you saw Julia on TV when you were a kid. Not sure the time frame you grew up, but when you were a little girl, what did you dream of becoming as when you would become an adult?
Well, to be honest, I really always had an interest in caring, for other people. So I thought at first I wanted to be a nurse, but then that kind of deviated to something different. But I still realized that somewhere, I think deep down inside my soul, this is what I would eventually become, was a nurse, even though I did it later in life. My kids were in school, and, while they were in school, I went back to school and became a nurse. And before then, I worked, in offices like as an office manager, administrative assistant, and did those types of things. But deep down inside, I knew that I wanted to take care of people, because it seems like when I was younger, I was always helping, doing things, thinking about, illnesses and hearing people with the illnesses in my household, wondering what that meant, and why is this going on? Why is that? So I always had that question in the back of my mind about illness, and I wanted to know more. But at that particular time, when I was growing up, I grew up like in the early 60s, I would say. And, we weren't really exposed to a lot of professions as far as like nursing. We were taught like, okay, maybe you can become a teacher, you can become other things, but the medical field wasn't something that was really encouraged to us at that time. So now, of course, I think that the youth are so very, very impressed with things around them, because in school it's different. It's a different age and a different time, and we can do all things. We can do all things. So I did realize my goal, and I went to school back, and like I said, later on, and that was what I pursued.
You know what? It's amazing. When I grew up, I think we grew up around the same time. I was born in 1962. So it's funny that now the opportunities that people have, and for my mom and my grandmother, there were even fewer. You were a woman, a nurse, or a school teacher, to dream of even being a writer. You didn't even see that many African-American writers, which leads me into my next question for you. How old were you when you realized you just knew that you wanted to be a writer?
The odd thing about that is even though I read very young, because I always, I was handed a book when I was very young, and I started reading, and I loved reading, and, I loved writing. Those were my favorite subjects in school. I didn't pursue writing until like maybe about, I'd say, 12 or 13 years ago. And it happened because there was a crisis going on in my life, and I started journaling. And as soon as I started journaling, after about a year, I realized I really wanted to do something with these words and put them into a book. But as a young kid, I never thought about writing. I didn't. It came later in life. Mm-hmm.
Very, very interesting. But you were introduced to books. Tell us about that path. I just have a few more questions I'm going to ask you before we launch into talking about your books. Tell us about that path. Who inspired you? It was later in your life. You were introduced to books as a child, but I guess it didn't catch. As a child. Yeah. So who inspired you though to start? You just started journaling. A lot of people journal. A lot of people write in diaries when they're teenagers, preteens, working through that age transition. Was there a particular incident to take you from journaling to book writing? Did somebody inspire you to take that path?
You know what? I read a lot of, I didn't even read fiction, to be honest. I read a lot of biographies and autobiographies, and I used to always be interested in reading others' lives, and some of them some people wrote their own stories, and that was something that I thought of doing at that particular, and I knew that I wanted to do something that was fiction, but I hadn't read any fiction books, so I started reading fiction books. And the first book I think I picked up the first two books were like one by Victoria Christopher Murray, and then Kim Roby and Kimberly Lawson Roby. And those were the first fiction books, but I've always read autobiographies. I read like Tina Turner's life, and there were so many other people that, did other things, and that's when I really started reading. But I read books in school, and I read, like the books that were given to me, but my inspiration came from something that happened in my life, and I felt like I had to journal and write more about it, and then I said, well, how can I present this? And I thought I was going to do something similar to what somebody else has done, but I said, well, I'm not a famous person. Who would want to buy my book, So what I did is I took some of the things in my life and made a fiction story out of it. And that's what I did. That was my first project, Reflections of a Quiet Storm.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, so now you've given us a little insight into one of your books. but I have two other questions I want to ask you. What does, and when I was researching for your interview, this question is one I wanted for myself. What does a nurse educator do? What does a nurse educator do?
Okay. Well, a nurse educator generally, you either do one of two things. You're either teaching in the hospital and you are teaching other professionals in the hospital, or you are like teaching academically like I do. I've been a nurse for 20 years, but I also I teach nursing students. I teach nursing students how to become nurses. So I teach theory, I teach mental health, I've taught med-surg, I've taught other courses, and you teach them in class. But in nursing, you have to have a clinical component so the students can learn how to do the hands-on types of things that they need to be proficient at when they take care of patients, such as starting IVs, learning how to give medications the proper way, maybe doing a Foley catheter. So they need to know how to do all those things when they're in the hospital. So I do nurse education in the hospital as well as teach in the classroom. But I've been a nurse myself. Of course, you have to have the nursing background and experience in order to be a nurse educator. So I've taken care of patients in the hospital. And then you basically, if you're going to do academic nursing, then you do something that you specialize in. Like I'm a mental health nurse, and I'm also an ER nurse, so I specialize in teaching in mental health now.
Oh, my goodness, I'm impressed. So you worked for 20 years as a nurse, and now you're actually teaching nurses, but it's not like you're not in a college teaching a nursing program that leads to a degree. These people already have their degree.
Right, I am in a college teaching. That's correct. Yeah, I am teaching in a college. Yeah, it's affiliated with a college, but when the students do, it's just like the medical doctors. They learn at a college to get a degree, but they still have to go to the different facilities to learn how to take care of patients. So you might be in the classroom teaching at a university one day, or 2 days, and then you may spend a day or two in the hospital teaching those same students, because they have to go to the hospital to get the clinical experience.
Okay. Now, Patricia, we've had people on who, one lady, she's an attorney. She practices law, and she also writes novels. And I think about the brain. You said the mental health, and I know you have to know this being a nurse because you know the human anatomy, how the brain works and everything. You got that left-right brain going. How do you balance being the practical mind, using the practical mind of a nurse with the creative mind of a writer? How do you go back and forth across that bridge?
Oh, well, you know what? It took a while in the beginning because, I really had to find that time, to just like go home and relax and just separate, what I had done that day with the students and put that aside, and then just go into writer mode. Because if you don't take the time to do it, you basically you can't, So I won't say that I don't incorporate some things from my nursing experiences, because I've incorporated lots of things, that I've utilized in stories, but not about a particular person, maybe just a combination of patients that I've taken care of. I've taken that and used it in my stories, but also just from my life experiences I incorporated. So it's, as you begin to do it, you just have to, kind of divide the two, I would say. But then I think you ultimately are going to have some things that are going to come into play from your work history and your life history, I would think.
Okay.
For me,
can you give us
that's the way it's been.
And I admire that you're able to do that, particularly one of the things that can be a roadblock, not only to authors, but to musicians and painters. You have to have enough energy freed up in you to create. If you're too stressed or it's just, you can't do it. You have to have enough energy flowing and freely in you to create as well. So the fact that you don't deal with those blocks, and then some writers, the editor is constantly going, so they have a hard time writing. It's too frustrating because their editor comes out, no, that sentence is wrong. Shouldn't have said that. You should have said this. Then they step away. But then on top of it, you've got to bridge those two minds from that
you
practical
do.
nurse educator role to the creator role. So I commend you for doing that, Patricia. Now we're ready to talk about your books. People know a little bit about you, who's the author of the books, and maybe some people who've read your stories for years may have learned things about you that they didn't know before. But now, can you give us a brief synopsis of your first novel? And based on my research, correct me if I'm wrong, your first novel was A Generation of Curses. Can you give us a synopsis of this novel? And let us know, Patricia, is this a work of fiction or nonfiction? Because I wasn't sure.
Okay, well, that's actually my second one, but I can talk to you about that probably better because of the fact that the first one was just so long ago. But A Generation of Curses is my second, and that was a collaboration with my daughter-in-law. And actually, the book was about a woman who basically, she actually witnessed the murder of her boyfriend, and that was many years prior. And what had happened is that, she was cleared, and, because a lot of the family thought that maybe she had something to do with the murder, and they thought it was very suspicious, but she moved on. And then the book actually starts, out with a scene, from when that occurred. But then we move forward, and now she is married to the assistant pastor, Malcolm Hill, who is due to become the next pastor of his father's church. And she runs her own business. She has a daughter. But then one day, a detective knocks on her door and says the case from many years ago is now being reopened, and she is a prime suspect. So now, these things begin to unwind, and there's a lot of chaos in the church. There's frustration with her marriage, and there's just so many things that go on. And then basically, the question is, will their marriage survive this onslaught, and will her reputation be redeemed? And will she and her husband be able to stay together, despite all of the problems that are going on? So it's basically filled with faith, but then some of the other things are people who are very cruel to her. They're looking at her in a different way now because this comes out in the open about her past. So it's really, really a dynamic story, and I really, really enjoyed writing it. And as I said, my daughter-in-law, some of the things were based on her life, but not exactly. It wasn't like it was her story. It was just some of the things that actually occurred.
Do you think I've had authors on and authors I've interviewed for the Book Lovers Having a newsletter that I have. Mm-hmm. They'll have a character who has this hidden past. Do you think that everybody, when you go to church, you think everybody's been in church forever? You can't even imagine. Yes. You can't even imagine, particularly a minister, or that they had this other life. Some people still have that other life, but some people you think all you see is all that there ever was to them. Do you think most people you're taking on an interesting human, I guess, experience in A Generation of Curses? Do you think most people have that a past life that is nothing like the life they're leading today?
I believe that's true. I really do. Because I think there's no one in this world that can say that they have lived a perfect life, And some people do not want to disclose things, but sometimes it's better just to get it out into the open and not have it, where it's hidden. Because when you talk about these things, sometimes you'll find that some of these are really deep-seated problems that may have happened even in your childhood, your young adulthood, even currently, that are really, really preventing you from moving forward. And you really have to expose things. Maybe you don't want to talk to the whole world about it, but I think if you actually bring things out to people that you trust and care about, and you can move forward, because, you'd be surprised at how many people really get ill, mentally ill, because of their past and things that they are trying to hide from others.
And you would know that. Based on your training. Oh, my goodness. I can see now, I'm listening to you as the interview goes forward, how your training could even subconsciously help you with your developing your characters and your plot.
It does.
Now, Patricia, how did she know, and I think this is why a lot of us do go to a worship center while we pray, while we meditate. We want to know that it's almost like, Lord, I can have the courage to do something as long as I know that it's you telling me to do it, because then I know I'll have success at it, and I won't run into destruction now or later because I took this step. How did Khadijah know? How did she know, Patricia, that it was God who was directing her to move to California?
Well, I believe that, for one thing, earlier on it's exposed that she was threatened, and and I don't want to tell too much, she did have a deep secret, that nobody knew about, not even her husband. But there were some threats made, so, after those things started happening, she knew it was time to move forward. However, there's something still in her past that she didn't share, and she should have shared earlier with her husband before they married. And I think that was the one reason why this past came to haunt her. And I think eventually what she did know is that, she really needed to open up, trust God, and be honest with her husband, which she didn't do initially. And then that's why all of this chaos started. Because if he had known some of the things that he knew later on, then I think it would have been a lot easier for her to deal with all of the tarnishment that came on her life,
What type of business does Khadijah run?
She's an event planner. She plans different events like weddings and parties and things such as that. She's a pastor's wife, but she still has her own business.
Okay. Can you tell us about her husband? I know he's assistant pastor of Solid Rock Christian Ministry. What is Khadijah's husband? What's his personality, his approach to life? What's he like?
Well, Malcolm Hill, he's young, he's very smart, he's energetic. He's the one son, because there's a brother, and both of them are kind of at odds about the pastor's seat, but he's the preferred son because he's the one that actually encourages membership. He actually participates and does things. I mean, he loves his wife dearly. There isn't anything he wouldn't do for his wife and his child. They have a young daughter. And he is just the one that is expected to take the seat in the pastorship. But because of all the chaos that comes along, it's just one big mess. And the thing about it is that the good part about it is that he does come to realize that he really has to support his wife, because, there's chaos. When you're married to someone and you're not honest with them, you find out something 8 or 9 years later, and then all of a sudden it's like a big surprise, And not only is it a big surprise, it's a threat, to you as a minister and your relationship with your father and the church members. Then, you start to wonder, and he was angry with her at first. But I think the strength of his character was that he believed in God, he was a man of God, and he knew that he had to support his wife. And that's the kind of man he is.
And also, do you tackle not only that it could impact his reputation, the reputation of his father, who is the pastor of Solid Rock Christian Ministries. He's, of course, the assistant pastor, but also could impact not just his reputation, but do you also tackle it from the standpoint that now Malcolm's wondering, okay, she hid this big thing. What else is she hiding?
What else? Exactly. And that's the big thing. The big thing, I won't expose it, but that's the one big thing that he didn't learn until later in the story. And that crushed him. That really crushed him. So,
it's similar to
right,
somebody.
yes. I'm sorry.
It's similar to if somebody has an affair, and they hid it for years, and later you find out sometimes that they had an affair and it was going on for years, and they kept you clueless, and or you find out they have a 10-year-old kid, and you're like, excuse me.
Exactly.
I'm thinking about, I don't want to give the movie away, but I maybe shouldn't say this if people haven't seen it, but Fences, that kind of thing will make your mouth swing open. So I don't want to give it away, but it's that kind of thing with Khadijah and Malcolm. You're like, you never let on that any of this. What else are you hiding from me? Now, do the police, they question Khadijah before she moves to California, which would make me wonder, is she thinking God led her there, or is she running away? Do the police question her before she moves or after she's moved?
Well, yes, because initially she basically is arrested because, when there's a murder, the first thing the police want to look at, I think, is the people that are in the immediate family, the wife, first of all, or somebody close, or girlfriend, So, yes, she was arrested, And as a matter of fact, the first scene goes back to when she was in jail that time, because kind of the prologue is kind of like a beginning of where she started, and it starts from that part, and then comes the first chapter is the actual up-to-date story. But yeah, she was arrested and taken to jail, but they cleared her. So, and it was difficult for her, but eventually she knew she had to move on because of the things that were happening in the city that she lived in, and because of the ex-boyfriend's family's belief that she murdered her boyfriend. So that was a serious situation there. Mm-hmm.
So you decided to really jump into the story. I told the listeners you take on real life issues, and you sure do. Can you introduce us to some of the other? We know Khadijah and Malcolm. Can you introduce us to some of the other main and minor characters in A Generation of Curses? And also, do Khadijah and Malcolm, do they have any children?
They have one child, one daughter. And the others are basically Stacy, who is her sister-in-law, and then they have Corbin, who is the other son. That's Malcolm's brother. He's also a brother who could possibly be up for the pastoral seat in the father's church when he retires. But most everyone knows that it's Malcolm that the father prefers, but it's in the air. And then there's also Maxie, who was a close friend of Khadijah's. She's a very close friend of, she's a close friend of Stacy's. So she has her own salon, and she's always had this crush on Malcolm for years and years, but he actually met and married Khadijah. So those are kind of the main characters in the story. And then, of course, we have the parents, Reverend and Mrs. Hill.
Okay, Stacy sounds a little bit interesting. I can tell she has a big role. I definitely don't want to give anything in the story away, but Malcolm's parents, do they ever become aware of Khadijah's past? And if whether they do or don't, what are their feelings about Khadijah? Do they accept her? Do they not like her but tolerate her because their son married her? What is their relationship with her like?
They actually accepted her, and they loved her, as a matter of fact. They loved her. They didn't really care for Stacy as much, which is Corbin's wife. But they loved her. But actually, after they found out about the situation and they found out that she was now being investigated for a murder, then the whole situation just really, it wasn't very good. It wasn't very positive, I should say. And of course they worried about so many things that would change, in terms of membership and what would the church members think. So it was very chaotic after that, to say the least.
Oh my goodness, story sounds so good. Now, where and when does the story A Generation of Curses take place? And I have one more question before we go into reflections of a quiet storm. But where and when does the story A Generation of Curses take place? Is it in the 1980s, 90s, current day, and where is it happening?
Right, it is placed in Los Angeles. And, of course, she's from Kansas City, so that's where she was born and raised, and that's where the actual murder took place, was in Kansas City. Mm-hmm.
So A Generation of Curses, I'm listening to you talk about this story, and it sounds extremely interesting. But the title, why did you call it A Generation of Curses? Generation, I'm thinking something that happens over and over and over. Why?
Mm-hmm.
What significance does that title hold to the story itself?
Well, it had something to do with her family, something that happens in her family. Years and years ago, there was a death and by a female who was a member of her family, a great-great-grandmother, I believe. I'm trying to remember the relationship, but I believe it's like a grandmother, a great-great-grandmother, who was actually suspected of killing the grandfather. So that was something. That's the reason why.
So did you get this idea for this story? Wow, you got a very layered story. Did you get?
Yeah. And that was my daughter-in-law's choice. Like I said, it was based on some things that happened in her life, so that was actually her choice for the story, for the title.
So you didn't.
We just kept it.
So that's okay.
So we kind of voted on it, you know.
Story. This sounds like this story is so meaty. It could be a series, a book series. It just to go into everybody's life, to really let the reader know what's happening. This sounds like it would take 2 to 3 books to tell that story, the grandmother's story, and then go on. This is a very layered story. It sounds like to me.
It is, yeah. And actually, readers have asked for a sequel. We've just never gotten around to doing the sequel. We kind of moved on to other things because I had a short story that I had to submit for my publisher, so I didn't get to that section.
Okay. It sounds like you could go back and maybe go to where it starts, the Generation of Curses, and readers go, oh, okay, now I get it, more understanding with it. So Reflections of a Quiet Storm, this is another of Patricia Bridewell's stories. Is it based on a real-life event? That Generation of Curses sounds so interesting, but is Reflections of a Quiet Storm, is that based on any real-life event?
That was based on some things that actually occurred in my life because that was my first book. That was the very first book.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Can you give us an overview of Reflections of a Quiet Storm?
Okay. Reflections of a Quiet Storm is based on some true facts. It's about Pauline Bridges, who is a CEO and business owner. And so after a near-fatal accident, what happens is, she has a life-changing experience. And so the life-changing experience, basically, she begins to reveal things begin to reveal her past. She has flashbacks and dreams of the past, and they kind of unfold in, a lot of subsequent stories. The long journey kind of unveils many secrets, and she has memories about a brutal past in terms of, problems with, her ex-husband who was addicted to drugs, and also a rape. So these things come to mind, and I think what really happened, trust God to get through this period of her life, because it was just such a devastating thing that she kept hidden, inside, and she never wanted to open up and really disclose it. So she met somebody by the name of Keith, and he really just kind of opened up a tunnel for her to just come through and disclose some of the things that she needs to disclose, and he was there for her. And in the end, I think what really happens is that she has learned to, live again and breathe again because she's actually exposed to things that stayed within her for so long. And I think sometimes you have things happen to you in life. You're in an accident, you have a near-death experience, or you have something very, very devastating happen to you in life, and you realize, you can't just stay where you are. In order to grow, you got to move forward, and you have to find a way to do it. But first is trusting God. That's basically the story.
And that's a good message, Patricia. I almost called you Pauline. That is a wonderful message. Now, from your training, this is something that I know we're talking. I do not want to talk about single mama dating drama, but from your training, have you? Is it? I've heard people say this. We've heard of amnesia, where people forget their name, and we know about Alzheimer's and the different types of where the brain starts to deteriorate and people forget things. And as we age, that happens to all of us. You just get older and you say, "Oh my God, what did I put my keys? Where did I put that pad?
Exactly.
So that
oh my gosh.
That happens. But
all the time.
But Patricia,
yes.
when you think of amnesia, and I'm not sure what causes amnesia versus Alzheimer's and those types of dementia-related illnesses. I don't know enough about the brain to know what causes the difference in the two. But then we have where people say if there's too much trauma, you can actually bury a memory, an event that occurred to you, and as though consciously it's like it never even happened to you, but your unconscious remembers it.
Right. PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder.
People. Oh, that's what causes
it's
that.
Like a lot of people identify PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, with just people in the military, but no, it can happen to somebody who's had something very traumatic to them, like a rape, or if they've been in an accident, or something very crushing. They can have post-traumatic stress disorder as well, And that's just something that it's hard.
Is that what Pauline? So because you said she has this near-death experience. One thing on Off the Shelf, and I think great writers do this. Great writers tell stories that make it safe. Almost, you don't intend to do it; you just want to tell a great story, but it can make it safe for a person to heal, because they're just reading a story about a fictional character.
That's true.
And their mind, maybe at the unconscious level, is starting to work. And you can actually help somebody to heal. But, and that's not your intention as a writer. That's not your intention. But it can happen. But does Pauline Bridges, does she deal with post-traumatic stress disorder? Because why would all this suddenly come up just because she had an accident?
Exactly. And I think what it is I left it open for people to try to think, to try to envision what it is. I didn't really mention it, but it was my intent for them to know that, there was something going on with her emotionally, So, I didn't actually bring it out, as a disorder, but in my mind, I think, as I go back and read the story, I think that was the intent, was to let them know that she really had an emotional problem that she really needed to deal with, but it was as a result of her past. So I think that's really what, I didn't say it, though, in the book.
Can you describe her? She's an interesting character to me. Can you describe her? And to our off-the-shelf listeners, we're talking about Pauline and what she goes through after this accident and all these memories come back. But I want our listeners to know a little bit more about her before that, and also tell our listeners, she's actually a CEO to our listeners. She's a CEO, and she's the owner of a nursing registry. So she sounds to me like before the accident, she would be somebody people would view as really having it going on. And I'm thinking of people like Kathy Hughes or Oprah, that their life seems so well put together. Is that what she's like? And then can you describe her before the accident for our listeners?
Sure.
And then what is she like after the accident?
Okay. She actually is, she's kind of quiet, but she's very organized. She has her own business. She's the CEO, and this is something that she had wanted to do because she wanted to open the registry, basically because she wanted to give other nurses an opportunity to work under her, and then she also wanted to leave something for her kids, because she did have 2 adult kids, and she wanted to be able to leave something for them. And so she had been in this business for a while, and she's in church-going woman, Christian. Strong beliefs in helping others. She was very helpful to her kids and family. And so she just actually, after she went through this divorce, it was really, she had the divorce before the accident. And then after the accident, she had closed her life off to any kind of relationships, to any other, whatsoever. No romantic relationship. She wanted nothing to do with dating or to even have any kind of engagement with a male. So that was a big problem for her. But what happened was, when she met Keith Maris, then he began to open up the door for her to begin to expose her emotions and learn to love again. And then, it was also the fact that she really needed to dig deep and find out what it was that really was the problem. And I think this accident, sometimes things happen for a reason. You don't like to ever say that accidents or anything as traumatic as a rape or anything like that happened, but the accident happened, I think, for a reason. And that reason was for her to just know, she needs to move forward and she needs to trust God, and, when she trusts God and know that he's going to work things out for her, and then begin to trust your relationships with other people, share what's going on, And I think with Keith Maris, God sent him, really to save her, in other words, from her emotional crisis. Because, many people can live and have emotional crisis and you wouldn't even know how much they suffer.
That's what I'm saying.
Because they don't share it.
I'm listening to you even when you're talking, and I appreciate what you're sharing, but she seems so well put together. It's almost like the way she was before the accident is what most people are striving to be like. You see what I'm saying?
Exactly.
So it's like people want to be her before the accident, and then you put her in this accident, and you see she doesn't have it so together. That is always shocking to me. Whenever I see somebody, they look like they've got it so together. They are what other people are striving to be like, and then you find out all this other stuff. You're like, oh my God.
Right, you didn't know. You find it hard to believe that they are not really everything they appear to be. Because deep down inside, we all have
every time it's a shock. It's a shock every time. It's like, how did you? It's just amazing. Like, how did you? Were you able to put forth that image? And maybe it was real to some degree, and then you find all this other stuff out, and you're like, oh my God. Now your latest work is in a single mama dating drama. You write Christian novels. Was it always your intent before? And this wasn't a question I had set out to ask you, but in listening to you talk about a generation of curses and reflections of a quiet storm, what is it? When you started writing as a Christian author, did you say, you know what, I'm taking on these hard issues. I'm not gonna write these cleaned up stories. Was that always your intent, or did that just happen organically on its own?
It was just organically, because I feel I just wanted to write what was in my heart. I knew that being raised as a Christian, and like I said, I'm never going to ever present myself as being the perfect human being, because we all have flaws. And I feel like even when you write Christian fiction, there should be something in the story that demonstrates that this person is not all flawless, we all, and so no, it was the intent to write inspirational stories, but my stories, I think, are a little bit on the edgy side, the edgy side being that I want to really show the realness of the person, I want to show that they do have flaws, that they can make mistakes, and toward the end, there should be a resolution, to the problem, but I still wanted to really show that, nobody's perfect but God. And so we can't, I like to really show real stories, be realistic, and write things that I feel that would be motivating and inspiring and uplifting. But at the same time, everybody has a problem. And some of my characters, even the editors say, I don't like that character. You're going to have to change her. And it's hard, because I said, well, she's not a good person. One side of her is good, but maybe there's something about her that other people wouldn't like. But I think we all have things that not everybody is going to like about us. So
yes,
that was my goal, So, I wrote these stories based on true facts, and then and a lot of it was fiction too as well. So, but I tried to make it seem as though, okay, you're writing about real people. You're not really writing about robots. So that was my theme. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. Now, your latest work is single mama dating drama. Tell us the inspiration behind your latest book?
Okay, so Single Mama Dating Drama is this is a Brown Girls Publishing anthology, and that's where myself as well as 16 other authors we wrote stories based on single mama dating. You know, which is really a trying time now. It's an up-to-date type of a story, and my particular story was about Layla, who had 2 children. And she had a teenage daughter who really did not want her to find love. You know, she had been single for a while, and she didn't want to try dating because she was so unsuccessful with it. But then finally, she met a guy. His name is Mojo, and he's an artist at the record company where she works. So what happens is they kind of, you know, start talking. It never really was meant to be anything other than just conversation. But as it began to spiral upward, then the teenagers, he had a daughter, she has a daughter. The teenagers are determined to see their parents not make it because of the fact that they don't want their parents dating. So it was a real fun story to write, and I was just so thrilled and grateful that Brown Girls chose me to be a contributing author. And the other stories in the book are just outstanding. I really love it, and, you know, I love writing short stories. This is the one I really enjoyed. But this is the Brown Girls Publishing book, Single Mama Dating Drama. And my title is called I Got My Mojo Working.
I got my mojo working. Now,
yes, and I might mention,
are you working on?
It's a best-selling anthology, African American Literary Book Club, single best-selling anthology.
Okay, congratulations to you and all the other authors. I got my mojo working. Patricia Bridewell in the Single Mama Dating Drama anthology. Are you working on a new novel now? Are you? I know you said you're done with The Generation of Curses, although I think that is a great series book. Are you working on any new novels right now, Patricia?
Right. 2 Steps Past the Altar is in the editing phase. You know, so I'm hoping that will be out in before the year is up, but it is in the serious editing phases where you got to go back and rewrite and revise. So it's coming. It's coming soon.
Give us a glimpse. Give us a glimpse into 2 Steps Past the Altar, please.
Okay.
Without giving the story away, just give a little.
Okay, just a little bit about the story. Okay, it is about a woman, and I'm trying to get my names now together because I'm thinking of all the characters. But anyway, Sasha, you know, is a pharmaceutical representative, and she's married to her husband, and her husband's name is Damien. And he is still in the military, and she travels quite a bit as a pharmaceutical rep, and everything seems like it's okay. Not quite, because he lives on the military base, and they're newlyweds, and she travels, and he doesn't come home that often. But her mother has an illness, and I think the gist of this story is it's about a woman who basically wants to find a cure for her mother's illness. Her mother has a very serious illness, and it's getting worse. So she meets this guy. You know, she's actually introduced to the CEO of a pharmaceutical company in Atlanta. And they kind of date really on a business level. But she finds out that he has a drug that could possibly cure her mom. And it gets a little serious. And from there, I want to just say, I don't want to say too much. But she begins to wonder if the marriage to her husband is really going to work. And she files for a divorce. And it's kind of an issue.
I gotta tell you, this nurse educator's mind. Oh my goodness, you come up with some fascinating stories. You come up with some fascinating stories. Do you see yourself, Patricia, as a mystery writer? Your stories have a bit of mystery to them.
You know what? And I've been asked that before. I do, in a way. I don't really see myself as a mystery. I think I kind of add a little bit of spice of everything. I write edgy. It's Christian. It's inspirational, but it's on the edgy side. So some things, people might say, well, you can't put that in a Christian book. But I'm just writing about things that happen or have happened, I mean, some men see themselves between two women. This woman happens to see herself between two men, and it gets to be chaos. It gets to be chaotic. But like I said, you know, it's in the editing phase, you know. Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness, 2 steps past the altar. You guys everybody will have to look out for it later this year from Patricia Bridewell. Now, Patricia, we only have a few minutes left in today's show. Can you share 3 to 4 steps that you have taken? I like to share tips with our listeners, particularly those who are writers themselves. But you can share like 3 to 4 steps that you've taken that you've actually found to be effective at getting the word out about your books.
Okay, what I really try to do is I use a lot of social media, you know, and that was introduced to me like many years ago, because for me to put myself on like Facebook or Twitter and all those different sites like maybe 10 or 12 years ago, I never would have even thought about it. But it's absolutely imperative. Social media is a very strong vehicle, you know, and I think that, you know, there's such a broad audience that you can attract from social media, and I've even been contacted, you know, from things that I posted on Facebook, you know, in terms of even doing an event. That's how I did my book club event a couple of years ago, because I was on Facebook. I also use paid advertisement, and I always look for other vehicles that I can use to promote the book. I go to events. I try to do at least several events per year, and not just my literary events. If there's something that I'm invited to speak at, say for a nurse promote here, you know, because you have to do things outside of the box. So I do that, and I try to do shows such as yours, and like once again I say, I'm grateful to be here, and you just try to make yourself visible. And I'm still searching for other things. I have a blog radio show. I mean, not a blog show. I'm sorry, not a radio show. I have a blog, and I write a blog, and that comes out twice a month. So just trying to do things to stay motivated. And, you know, when you're busy and you work, you know, you have to take time out to do these things, because if you don't, you know, nobody's going to know about your book. They just won't.
Yes, and there's so many books out here.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many books out here now. I mean, I can remember when I started, there weren't but a handful of African-American authors, and now it's, oh, my gosh. So
right.
You do, and you work in a full-time job, and you've got to keep or some people are writing full-time for other clients, but then you also have to find a time to keep the word out about your own stories, or they'll get buried.
They will. They will.
Of thousands of other books that are out here. How can off-the-shelf listeners get a copy of your books, Patricia?
Okay, they can buy them on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, Smashwords. My books are in the local bookstore here called Zara's Books and Things. That's in Inglewood, California. And there are other, I think, online agencies, but Amazon, Barnes & Noble, with Smashwords, I know for sure, and then Zara's Books and Things.
And so they're in ebook and print? Or?
Yes, they are.
All your books?
They're in ebook
as
well
ebook
as print.
Now, you said you're on social media. Please tell us where you are on social media and how off-the-shelf listeners can find you.
Oh, okay. On Facebook, Patricia Ann Bridewell. On Twitter, it's P.A. Bridewell. And, okay, then my blog is patriciaannbridewell.wordpress.com.
Okay. We have been honored to have Patricia Bridewell. I got to tell you, I got to get that generation of curses. All of her stories,
listen, I will send you a copy. Send me your address. I will send you.
No, I'm gonna support you. 2 Steps Past the Altar is due out later this year, but her mind. This is a nurse educator who has a mind that comes up with some plots from goodness only knows where. But we have been blessed to have Patricia Bridewell with us. She's an award-winning Christian author. She also has a story in the anthology Single Mama Dating Drama, but some of her book titles are again, 2 Steps Past the Altar, which she's working on. Keeping Faith, we didn't even get to that book today. Reflections of a Quiet Storm, A Generation of Curses, which I think is a great series book. And then, again, her short story in Single Mama Dating Drama. Please look out for 2 Steps Past the Altar later this year. But you can go out and get her other books in print or ebook format now. And she's online at patriciabridewell.com, PatriciaBridewell.com, patriciabridewell.com. She's going up to the top of one of my favorite guests. And her just her creativity, I would encourage you to bookmark her website, because who knows what she's coming up with next when she sits down to write her next story. So we encourage you to support author Patricia Bridewell, and I encourage you to go out and get a copy of Love Pour Over Me. You can enjoy these great stories when you are relaxing, looking for some entertainment. And a book is probably one of the least expensive forms of entertainment that's going to have the longest, it's going to last the longest that you can find almost anywhere. So we thank Patricia, and as I always tell you, you are awesome. You are amazing. You are incredible. Our off-the-shelf listeners and our guests, go out and create a fabulous day for yourself. See you back here next Saturday, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time or New York City time. Patricia, I'll shoot you an email. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.